I've always believed that peace is something you earn, not something that simply happens to you. For years, I worked to build a life that felt safe, steady, and full of love, a life far removed from the chaos that once shaped me. My name is Ethan Ramirez, and I wear a police badge in the small town of Harlow, Nebraska, where the wind rolls over golden plains and neighbors wave from their porches. To outsiders, Harlow seems like a postcard, a place where children ride their bikes down quiet streets, and the biggest excitement is the annual Harvest Fair. But beneath every calm surface, there's a current of stories, some tender, some painful, and some that never really fade. Every morning, I wake before dawn. The smell of coffee fills the kitchen as sunlight creeps across the windows. My wife, Sophia, always greets me with that sleepy smile that makes me feel grounded. Our daughter, Lily, is 4 years old and the heartbeat of our home. Her laughter dances through every room, and her curiosity keeps our days bright. She's the reason I breathe easier, the reason I remind myself that good things can grow even in the soil of a broken past. Most mornings, after breakfast, I walk Lily to preschool. She chatters the whole way, about butterflies, clouds shaped like dragons, and the storybooks we read the night before. Her hand fits perfectly in mine, and in those few blocks, the world feels right. By the time I drop her off and head to the station, I've already won the day, but even in the comfort of that routine, a shadow sometimes lingers. It hides behind the smiles, a whisper from a time I've tried to bury. My past isn't something I talk about. Not with my colleagues, not even with Sophia. But every so often, when the wind howls late at night, or a sudden noise echoes in the quiet, I'm pulled back, to the house I grew up in, to the sound of my father's voice when it turned from calm to thunder. My father, Victor Ramirez, was a man people respected and feared in equal measure. He worked hard, but he ruled harder. My mother, Elena, was his opposite, a soft-spoken woman with eyes that carried both love and sorrow. She was the kind of person who made even silence feel warm. Yet, I can still remember the nights when that warmth disappeared, replaced by tension, so thick you could almost taste it in the air. I was 10 when I first realized something was wrong, really wrong. I remember sitting in my room, hugging my knees as voices rose from the living room. Then came the crash of something breaking, my mother's muffled sob, and my father's anger cutting through the air like a blade. Those nights shaped me. I'd lie there wishing for the courage to step in, to stop him. But I was just a scared kid, helpless and small. The next morning, my mother would put on her smile, cook breakfast, and act as though the night before had never happened. I used to ask her why she stayed. She'd just say, because families stick together, Ethan. Even then, I knew she was lying, to herself, maybe more than to me. By the time I turned 17, I wasn't the same timid boy anymore. I'd grown taller, stronger, and angrier. I'd also grown tired of watching my mother suffer in silence. One night, when my father came home after too much to drink and started shouting about dinner being late, something in me snapped. I remember stepping between them, heart pounding, telling him to stop. The look on his face when I spoke up, surprise turning to rage, was something I'll never forget. He shoved me so hard I hit the wall, the pain searing through my shoulder. "You think you're a man now," he sneered. "You're just as weak as your mother." Those words burned into me. But they also lit a fire I've never let go of. That night, I promised myself that one day, I'd dedicate my life to protecting people like her, the ones who couldn't fight back. That promise is what led me into law enforcement. And while my father called it a fool's job, I knew it was my purpose. I left home soon after, keeping contact only with my mother. I'd visit her quietly when I could, always when my father wasn't around. I begged her to leave him, but she never did. "He's still your father," she'd say softly. And one day, he'll change. That day never came, years passed. I built my life in Harlow. I married Sophia, the most compassionate woman I've ever known, and together we brought Lily into the world. With them, I learned what love really meant. Still, I couldn't shake the occasional guilt that I'd escaped while my mother stayed behind. I'd send her money, call her often, and she'd always sound fine. But there was something in her voice, a tiredness she couldn't hide. One evening, after a long shift at the station, I sat on the porch watching the storm clouds roll in. The sky turned the color of steel, and the wind carried that electric scent that comes before heavy rain. Inside, Sophia was putting Lily to bed, humming softly. The moment felt peaceful, like every other night. But peace can shatter in a heartbeat. It started with a knock. Not the casual kind, but desperate, frantic. It was nearly 2 in the morning, and my instincts kicked in immediately. I grabbed my pistol from the table, approached the door, and called out, "Who's there?" Through the rain, I heard it. A voice I hadn't heard in months, trembling and weak. "Ethan, it's me." I froze. That voice belonged to my mother. I threw open the door. There she was, soaked to the bone, her face pale and streaked with rain. She looked smaller than I remembered, frail. Her clothes clung to her, and her eyes were wide with fear. "Mom?" I caught her just before she collapsed into my arms. She was shaking uncontrollably. I carried her inside, laying her gently on the couch. Sophia came running down the stairs in her robe, eyes widening in shock. Together, we wrapped my mother in blankets, trying to warm her up. She clung to my hand as she whispered, He did it again, Ethan. He threw me out." My stomach tightened. I didn't need to ask who he was. Between sobs, she told me everything. My father, Victor, had found himself a new companion, Brooke, a woman half his age, charming in all the wrong ways. Rumor had it she'd been pushing him to sell the house and transfer the land to her. When my mother refused to sign the papers, his temper exploded. "He said he doesn't need me anymore," she cried softly. "He told me I was in the way." Sophia sat beside her, holding her hand. "You're safe here," she said gently. "We'll take care of you." I don't know what finally pushed me from doubt to action. Maybe it was the way Clara smiled too quickly when I asked about her day, or how she started locking her phone like it carried buried treasure. Whatever it was, something inside me hardened that week. I needed the truth, even if it tore everything apart. It began quietly. One evening after Clara went to bed, I ordered a small security camera and mounted it by the gate, hidden beneath the porch beam. It faced the drive, recording each car that came or went. I told myself it was for safety, stray coyotes, packages, anything but the reason gnawing at me. For a few days, nothing unusual happened. Clara left at dawn, came home after work, kissed me like always, but then, one Thursday afternoon, I noticed the same thing again, that red clay clinging to her tires. The cafe was paved, the roads between there and home were gravel, not clay. I knew those stains came from somewhere north, the hills and pine trails I used to ride as a kid. A place I hadn't seen since my father's farm rotted into ruin after I left him behind. That night, Clara leaned against me by the fire, her laughter soft, her eyes bright, and for a fleeting second, I almost convinced myself I was imagining it all. But the truth has a way of humming beneath your ribs, refusing to go silent. The next week, I left the clinic early under the pretense of a supply run. I parked across from the cafe, far enough to avoid notice, and waited. Around noon, Clara stepped out, glancing over her shoulder before walking briskly to her car. She wasn't wearing her apron. She wasn't headed home, either. My hands tightened on the steering wheel as I followed her at a distance. Her silver hatchback veered off the main road, climbing the narrow dirt track toward the forest's edge. The sky hung low with clouds, the pines swaying in the wind. The road turned muddy, and soon, I saw it. A sagging cedar cabin crouched beneath the trees, its roof patched with a blue tarp. Parked outside was the same beat-up blue Ford Edith had described. Clara stepped out, smoothed her hair, and walked to the door. She knocked once, glanced around, and then disappeared inside. For nearly an hour, I sat there, the engine off, my breath fogging the glass. I wanted to believe it wasn't what it looked like. Maybe she was helping someone. Maybe she was planning a surprise for me. But as the minutes dragged on, I felt my chest hollow out. Finally, the door opened. Clara stepped out, her hair slightly mussed, her face soft with a strange calm I hadn't seen in months. She climbed into her car and drove off without looking back. I waited until the sound of her engine faded, then got out and walked toward the cabin. The red clay clung to my boots. My heart pounded like a drum in my throat as I peered through a grimy window. Inside, a man sat at a wooden table, pouring himself a cup of coffee. His shoulders were broad, his hair iron gray, and even after 20 years, I recognized that face. It was my father. The air left my lungs in one sharp gasp. Victor Harper. The man I'd spent half my life trying to forget. The man whose fists and words had carved scars deeper than any wound. He looked older, but not gentler, his eyes still hard, his jaw still set in that familiar, unyielding line. I staggered back, my mind spinning. Clara had been visiting him. My father, the same man I'd told her stories about in whispers, the same man I'd said I never wanted to see again. Why him? Why now? The questions burned through me for days. I didn't confront Clara immediately. Instead, I hired Tom Riley, an old friend and private investigator. He was gruff, quiet, the kind of man who didn't ask why, just did the job. A week later, he placed a folder on my desk at the clinic. I didn't open it at first. My hands shook too much. When I finally did, the truth split my world open. Photos spilled out, Clara and Victor together outside the same cabin. Her hand on his arm. His face turned toward hers, smiling in a way I'd never seen him smile at anyone. Notes followed, text messages between them, filled with affection. The name Vic used again and again. Victor hadn't told her who he really was. He'd walked into her cafe months ago, claiming to be a retired traveler passing through. He'd charmed her, listened, told her stories of the son who abandoned him. And she'd fallen for it. By the time she realized who he was, if she ever truly did, it was too late. The report ended with one line from Tom: "He's been tracking you, Ethan. Watching your life. He wanted to take what you had." I sat in silence for a long time. There was no rage, just a deep, hollow ache. My father had found a way to break me without ever lifting a hand. Clara, the woman I'd trusted more than anyone, had helped him do it, whether by ignorance or choice, but I didn't want revenge born of hate. I wanted truth to stand on its own, for the lies to collapse beneath their own weight. So, I made a plan. The next week, I invited Clara's closest friends, her parents, and a few of Victor's old colleagues from his sheriff days to a small celebration. I told them it was to honor both of them, Clara's birthday, and Victor's supposed recovery from an illness. Everyone agreed, eager to surprise them. On Saturday morning, I drove everyone up the winding path, pretending I'd lost my way. "Let's stop and ask for directions," I suggested as we neared the cabin. I parked just far enough for them to hear what I already knew. Ray, Clara's father, knocked lightly on the door. It swung open, the room froze. Clara and Victor stood in shock, both half-dressed, faces drained of color. Clara's lips parted in disbelief as her mother gasped. Victor's hand dropped from her arm. The silence broke under the weight of disgusted voices, shouts, tears, disbelief. I didn't raise my voice. I simply stepped forward, holding out the photographs. "This is Victor Harper," I said, my voice steady. "My father. The man who hurt my mother. The man who swore I'd never have peace." Clara's knees gave way as she sank to the floor, sobbing, "I didn't know, Ethan. I swear I didn't." But I could see in her eyes the truth she didn't want to face. Somewhere deep down, she had known. Victor tried to speak, but his old deputy stepped forward, shaking his head. "You've done enough damage, Vic. Walk away." No one defended him. No one comforted Clara. The shame that filled that small cabin was its own kind of storm. I turned and walked out into the cold air. Behind me, I heard Clara call my name, her voice breaking, but I didn't stop. The weeks that followed were quiet, empty, but clean. Clara left Bozeman soon after, her job gone, her friends distant. My father's health declined. Word was, he suffered a stroke that left him barely able to speak. I visited once, months later, standing outside his cabin. Through the window, I saw a frail man staring into nothing. I felt no anger, only pity. As spring returned, I found peace in small things. The sound of owls at dusk, the laughter of children who visited the clinic to learn how to care for injured animals, the way sunlight turned the red dirt golden at dusk. Forgiveness didn't come all at once, it came slowly, like the thaw after winter. I forgave Clara, not for her sake, but for mine. And I forgave Victor, because carrying his hate any longer would mean letting him win. Montana's skies stretched wide above me again, open and endless. And for the first time in a long while, I breathed without bitterness.